For a long time, Daniel believed his resentment was doing something important. He didn't think of it as bitterness. He thought of it as memory, as awareness, as proof that he wasn't naive anymore. Holding on to it felt responsible. It reminded him what happened. It reminded him who hurt him. And most importantly, it reminded him what he would never allow again. Resentment to Daniel felt like a boundary. Every time the past surfaced, he told himself, at least I'm not pretending it didn't matter. At least I remember. And remembering felt like control. What Daniel didn't notice at first was how much energy it took to keep remembering the same way. How often his thoughts circled back to old conversations. How certain names still tightened his chest. He told himself this was vigilance. He told himself this was growth. But it was exhausting. Daniel's life looked stable on the surface. He showed up to work. He kept plans. He did what was expected. But there was a heaviness he carried quietly. It followed him into moments that had nothing to do with the past, into conversations that should have felt easy, into relationships that never fully relaxed. He didn't trust peace. Peace felt like carelessness, because the last time he let his guard down, something was taken from him. The details weren't dramatic. No single moment anyone else would point to and say, that's where everything changed. It was slower than that. A buildup of dismissal, of being minimized, of realizing too late that his effort wasn't being met with the same respect. When it ended, Daniel promised himself one thing: never again. And resentment became the evidence that he meant it. If he stayed angry enough, he wouldn't forget. If he stayed guarded enough, he wouldn't be hurt the same way. But years later, the danger was gone, and the resentment remained. That's when the cracks started to show. Not all at once, not in a breakdown. Just small moments where Daniel noticed how often his reactions were sharper than necessary. How patience didn't come as easily as it used to. He told himself this was maturity, that being less open was simply being realistic. Until one day, someone asked him a simple question. Not about the past, not about what happened. Just, are you actually protecting yourself? Or are you just still living inside it? The question lingered longer than he expected, because Daniel had always framed resentment as strength, as self-respect, as a refusal to tolerate what he once did. But that question introduced a different possibility. What if resentment wasn't a boundary anymore, just a habit? What if it wasn't keeping him safe, just keeping him anchored to something that no longer existed? Forgiveness in his mind had always meant something dangerous. It sounded like excusing behavior, like pretending the hurt wasn't real. So he avoided the word entirely, until he realized something important. Forgiveness didn't require reconnection. It didn't require conversation. It didn't require trust. It required release. Not for them, for him. Daniel began to understand that resentment had stopped being a shield a long time ago. Now it was a weight. He wasn't reacting to the present. He was defending against the past. And the past didn't need defending anymore. Forgiveness, he realized, wasn't about forgetting. It wasn't about rewriting what happened. It was about deciding that the pain no longer got to steer his life. That realization didn't come with relief right away. It came with resistance. Letting go felt risky. It felt like lowering a guard he depended on for years. But then Daniel noticed something else. The strongest boundaries he had now, the ones he actually trusted, didn't come from anger. They came from clarity. Forgiveness wasn't removing a boundary. It was placing the final one. The boundary between what happened and who he was becoming. Slowly, Daniel stopped revisiting old arguments in his head. Not because they didn't matter, but because they no longer needed replaying. What surprised him most was what followed. Space. Mental space. Emotional space. Forgiveness didn't make him softer in the way he feared. It made him steadier. And for the first time in a long time, his life wasn't organized around what he was protecting himself from, but around what he was moving toward. Forgiveness didn't erase what happened. It simply stopped letting it decide what happened next. And that, Daniel realized, was freedom. Not forgetting, not excusing, not reconnecting. Just choosing to live unburdened. Together, let's move from doubt to power, one story at a time.